Hey everyone, and welcome to The Year Was, the podcast all about today that gives you just enough information to effectively be that guy at the party, causing all your friends to question, hey, who invited you? Like, seriously, why are you here? I'm your host, Michael Montalvo, and for the next few minutes we will swim through the river of time to try and find out what makes today truly unique. In this episode, we examine the events that occurred August 24th. Perhaps the most well-known of all the volcanic eruptions in the history of the world would have to be that of Mount Vesuvius, which resulted in the destruction of the city of Pompeii and the deaths of its people. It was so much a fixed point in time that even the doctor couldn't prevent it. What's interesting about the story of Mount Vesuvius is that the eruption really wasn't a sudden thing. It had a bit of a buildup that led up to it actually happening. How much of a buildup, I hear you asking me? Well, according to the article I read, 17 years before the eruption of Mount Vesuvius, the area was struck by an earthquake. This doesn't sound like a huge thing, except that the damage was heaviest around the Pompeii area, which has led to speculation that the epicenter was close to the city. And it wasn't just an earthquake. Reports started to come in from local herders that sheep were dying from what we now believe to be carbon dioxide poisoning. It was the combination of these things that has led to the belief that the earthquake was just a precursor to the eruption. The crazy part, depending on how you look at it, is that this wasn't the only earthquake. 2 years after the 62 AD earthquake that killed all those sheep, Emperor Nero visited the area and performed in its theater. An earthquake struck during the performance, but according to Olmec, the stone head that guards the temple entrance, the legend says that Nero completed his performance, then evacuated the theater, and then the theater collapsed. Also, something about the shrine of the silver monkey. I don't know. And the earthquakes didn't even stop there! Exclamation point. On August 20th of 79 AD, more earthquakes began to shake, but these were a bit different from the previous years that the quakes quaked in. For starters, they really didn't stop, and over the next 4 days they steadily increased, but the sad part of this is that because of the frequency of all the earthquakes in the past, and I assume the relatively non-violence of the most recent, people were simply not worried about it. They must have figured out that these were like the ones before it, and would pass in time with no major issues. But this day, this 24th of August, would be different. The year was 79 AD, and on this day, August 24th, Mount Vesuvius is thought to have erupted, destroying the city of Pompeii and burying the surrounding areas in mud, ash, and debris. As most stories go, the day started off just like any other, and yada yada yada. After a series of tremors, no word on if the graboids were involved, at what is believed to be 1 p.m., Mount Vesuvius erupted with a great force. Dark clouds filled the sky, blocking out the sun as volcanic pumice, hot gas, ash, and more rushed its way out of the volcano, climbing 9 miles into the air where it spread, covering the skyline. According to history.co.uk, every second, 1.5 million tons of volcanic debris was thrown into the air. The heat from the eruption was no joke either, as it has been compared to 100,000 times that of both atomic bombs used during World War II. The cloud of destruction made its way to Pompeii, covering the distance in no time. Pompeii has been described as a thriving industrial hub, full of luxurious villas. Because many were not concerned about the volcano, they did not attempt to evacuate beforehand. But after the eruption, people understandably panicked. Some were killed in the shower of pumice and volcanic rock, while others were killed trying to escape, being trampled by the masses. The most common form of death, however, was just choking to death. The air was full of carbon dioxide and was thick with dust and debris, and it was hot because of the volcanic gases. On dailymail.co.uk, it states that researchers now believe that if the plumes had only lasted a few minutes, that the destruction and the loss of life would have been more manageable. But research suggests that Pompeii suffered these plumes for 20 minutes, and from those 20 minutes had its various debris rain down for over 12 hours. When it was said and done, 2,000 people lost their lives and were buried along with their city by ash, freezing it all in a horrifying snapshot for time. But it wasn't just Pompeii, and things did not fare well for other nearby cities. To the west of Vesuvius, the city of Herculaneum, while initially protected, experienced a surge of hot air and gas, killing the people who remained there. So if everyone died, how do we know what happened? Pliny the Younger was staying nearby and wrote letters describing the explosion. According to Pliny the Younger, the eruption lasted 18 hours and left the city buried in 17 feet of ash, changing the landscape much like Krakatoa would do many years later. While Pliny the Younger survived, his uncle, Pliny the Elder, did not. The elder took his boats to investigate the eruption and to reassure citizens, but was overcome by toxic gas. The city would remain buried until the 18th century when a well digger unearthed a marble statue that was a part of Herculaneum. The government began to excavate, but eventually kind of gave up on it. In 1748, traces of Pompeii were found beneath a vineyard, and according to History.com, excavations were done nearly without interruption since then. Still, it wasn't until 1927 that the Italian government resumed its excavations of Herculaneum, where in 1982, skeletal remains were found of its people. Now, to be fair, there is still some debate on whether or not August 24th is the date of the actual eruption. Some believe it to be in October, as evidenced by autumn fruit that was found at the site. Yes, they found fruit. Everything was petrified. But August 24th remains the most widely believed and, thus far, accepted date. Today, Vesuvius is the only active volcano in the European mainland, and while its last major eruption was in 1631, with its last eruption being 1944, a Pompeii-level eruption is expected in the near future. That's going to do it for us today. If you like this podcast and want to hear more, give us a rate and a review. That helps me out and helps steer this in a direction that is hopefully good for all. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can find the Year Was audio version on your podcast app of choice. You can find me on social media and at YouTube at the Apple Cider Club. And as always, I want to thank the Tim Price Band for our musical theme. And thank you for listening. We'll see you next time.